Good evening, everybody. I'm your host, the one and only Mr. LP Stephen Sykes of Enliven Radio, part of LegacyInternetRadio.com. Today is April 15, 2014, and we're going to have some fun today. Today is also just so happened to be a year today that we opened up Enliven Radio, so we're happy to make it to this year anniversary and everything. We don't have all the party gear and everything going on, but we're moderately celebrating, but we're full of joy and grateful. As always, we're going to have a great show today, but as promised always, I'm going to start off the show with a small prayer. And I'm going to let our lovely extra co-host today, Ms. Bless, take care of that.
Putting me on the spot again, but that's okay. I came prepared. May we pray. Dear Lord, thank you for today. Thank you for you, because without you, there would be no us. There would be no world. There would be there would be nothing without you, dear Lord. We thank you for the good, the bad, and everything that makes us who we are. Thank you for the cold weather. Thank you for the hot weather. And we thank you just for you being you. In your name we pray, amen.
Amen. See? Told you.
We finally got it.
Yes, I got you. Today, shout outs to everybody that's listening to us on LegacyInternetRadio.com and also through the TuneIn application and on the MixLR page. Fortunately, we do not have our other co-hosts with us. Mr. Sincere and Ms. Brandy are not able to join us, but we were also lucky to be blessed to have Blessed here with us today. How are you doing?
I'm fine. I'm ending my celebration of my birthday weekend, so tonight should be my last night, and then back to regular.
Tonight is your last night.
Yeah.
How did it get to Tuesday?
Well, see, I started last Tuesday,
Oh,
so
okay.
it's been a week, and
Okay.
tonight should be the last night.
You got to show me how to celebrate a week like that.
How to celebrate a week?
Yeah.
You just have something to do every single night.
See, it's hard because mine's is December and it's Christmas time, so
Oh, yeah.
nobody ain't thinking about me.
That sucks. I'm sorry.
Okay. But I will make sure I still owe you a present. I got to think about what I'm going to get you.
It's okay. I'm not expecting anything. I'm just glad to be alive. That's all.
Well, you look very well for 29.
Thank you. You keep saying that. Thank you. I'm going to take that number. I'll take that number.
That's
Thank
not
you.
a problem. You're just glowing and everything else. So we're grateful for you to be here. And you're going to start joining us a little bit on a part-time basis now.
Yes. Whenever I'm not, already scheduled for something else, I will be here as often as I can.
I thank you kindly. We're going to just have to beat whoever is requiring your time other than us. So you can.
That's going to be hard. How you going to beat people at the church? Because that's where I am.
Well, I'm going to talk to the pastor.
Okay.
I'm going to have a talk and say, look, her time is done. She needs to provide services for us.
We'll see how that works.
Okay,
Go
no
ahead.
problem. Also, I have a little one guest here. Another good lady who joined us, Miss Ashley. She was not able to join us today, but I happen to have a beautiful young little girl. Her name is
Carter.
How you doing, Carter?
Good.
All right. How old are you, Carter?
How old are you?
Just say how old you are. She is shy. Earlier she was talking and playing stuff on my computer and everything, but she didn't want to say nothing else. She's shy. But when she wants something, she'll speak up.
Like chocolate milk.
All right. And I have a wonderful guest here today and everything who's traveled through us far and wide. I had to disturb her because she was saying she was on her way to Vegas for the week.
What?
But, she said, all right, so she put her plane on hold and came on down to Richmond. And I'm going to let her introduce herself for everybody.
Hi, I'm Karenne Wood. I'm a Monacan Indian, and I'm directed the Virginia Council on Indians for about 4 years at the state level. And I work in Virginia Indian programs at the Virginia Foundation for the Humanities. I'm real happy to be here.
Awesome. And where is all this located at?
We work out of Charlottesville, but I drive all over the state, and I do presentations to the public and various groups and schools.
I thank you very much because that's a very important thing. and that you do. Forgive me for the Sports Center updates.
You have to turn your phone off, sir.
And I'm working on that. See, this wasn't the movie, so I didn't have the reminder. So I just figured I'd just try to do what I can. Is your phone turned on?
It is.
Okay.
Always.
All right.
You never know where I'll be. I might need to have it turned on.
I'm leaving that one alone. Staying out of grown folk business. But I thank you very much for being here and stuff like that. And I said, I told you she was about to Vegas because she earned mad money for what she do.
I don't want to go to Vegas. I'll throw all my money away.
Oh, boy. Now, first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself. I know that you say you're Monacan Indian. Where else? Where were you born?
I was born in Washington, D.C., because they didn't have a hospital in Fairfax at that time. That's how long ago it was.
Oh, my. You don't see. I have to see some ID.
It's been a while.
Okay, not a problem. No Fairfax. There's like 10 of them in Fairfax now.
I know it. It's crazy. Yeah.
Okay, well, so you had to leave from Fairfax, go to D.C., and you grew up around the Fairfax, Northern Virginia area.
I grew up in Northern Virginia. Yeah, I spent the early part of my life there, moved to Fredericksburg, moved to Charlottesville, so I'm slowly getting away from all that traffic. As it increases, I move farther.
Well, Charlottesville's gotten a little bit more traffic nowadays. That 250 bypass, whatever, is pretty bad now.
A little bit, but it's laughable compared to Northern Virginia.
Oh, yeah. Pantops Mountain is crazy.
Yeah, about it. It's like, oh, we got traffic. There's one stop.
Okay, no problem. Well, so you've traveled on. You can go ahead, Carter wants to go. Okay. So now you got into, so you basically been in Northern Virginia, Fredericksburg, and Charlottesville. Mm-hmm. What made you decide to go to Charlottesville?
Well, I was working up in Rockville, and the job that I had at that time, Rockville, Maryland, job I had at that time ended, and just at the same time I got accepted into grad school at University of Virginia. So I went there in 2004, and I've been in Charlottesville ever since. The job that I have now materialized in 2007, and that's where I've been.
What made you decide, besides, obviously, you're a natural Native American, what made you decide to get into humanities, like when you went to school? Well, let me ask you this. Which high school did you grow up in?
I went to W.T. Woodson.
Okay, that's a middle school now, is it? Or did it?
No, it's still a high school.
High school, okay, because they changed so many around of that area. What? Go ahead, Miss Bless. I'm sorry.
No.
Oh, okay. What? When you growing up as a Native American in Fairfax, what was that like?
It was a strange thing. I really kind of thought that our family were the only Indian people around because we didn't have connections to our tribal community at that time. And the place that I live was really kind of a white bread place. There wasn't the diversity that you see in Northern Virginia now. That did not exist at all. And so it was lonely, really. I felt very different from other kids. I knew that I was Native, and my father had taken a real pride to instill that in us. But it wasn't until I got to my 30s that I really connected with our tribal community. And at that point, I started working and writing grants for our people and really getting into the history and what it means to be an American Indian.
What would you say is, where did you go to college?
George Mason.
Okay. Now, it's kind of interesting because from my understanding of the area, and I've traveled and even lived in the area, I was led to believe for a while there was always diversity. Now, there was issues with the diversity, but within it, but there were always diversities. How was that?
Well, George Mason was becoming more diverse the first time I went through as an undergraduate, and then I went back 15 years later and did a Master of Fine Arts, and everything had changed. You could hear just about any language being spoken on the campus, and I thought that was really exciting.
When you came, so now after we left George Mason, I'm assuming a few years ago you was very happy when the team went to the Final Four, almost got down there.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Now that you got out of college and you said you connected in your 30s, how did you connect more? Was it just through someone finding you a happenstance? You just decided to get in touch with your culture?
I was researching my own family history. We had done our genealogy, and I happened across the Monacan Nation, an article about the people and what they were doing. And I got in touch with the woman who was doing genealogy for the tribe, and we were able to make the connection. And with the Monacan people, if you are able to connect to what they call their original roles and show that descent, then you're able to apply for membership. So it's not based on blood quantum or some of the other restrictions that other tribes have. And once I made that connection, then I did apply for membership, and it just became really the overriding force in my life. I had always been really interested in Native history since I was like 12, and I read Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee and realized just how unjust that story was and how much of it has been left out in the telling, what we learned in school. And so it became really important to me to try to add to the story, try to help other people share their perspective, because it's a one-way story.
When you growing up, what would you say employment, what was you being a Native American difficult in terms of finding employment, friendships, churches? How was all of that for you?
It wasn't really difficult finding employment. I didn't have any trouble with that because I look white, so that wasn't an issue. And I don't think there was the prejudice against Native people that there was in the past. Certainly a generation ago, people in our tribal family didn't get what they call public jobs. They farmed and they cut wood and they sustained themselves as best they could, but they were poor. That was in rural Virginia. Where I was growing up, it was different. So I think that because our family left that tribal community a few generations back, I was privileged in a way that I never would have been if we had stayed there.
What made your family leave that tribal community?
Because it was hard. It was really hard to be a Native person. Back in the 1920s, there was a law passed in Virginia called the Virginia Racial Integrity Act, and it effectively split people into two groups. There were white people and then colored people, and that's the way Virginia delineated. There was no real focus on Asian. There was not even a category called Hispanic, and at that time it became a felony for a person declared to be white to marry a person of color. And so Native people felt like they were really shut out. They weren't able to identify as Indian, and many of them left their tribal communities at that time, including my family.
One of them, there were several of them. One of them, remember the one was in 20, there was also the one in 24.
That's the one.
Okay.
Yeah, 1924.
Okay.
Racial Integrity Act.
Now, how has that affected, well, you said it didn't affect you to go to work. How did it come about when you went to University of Virginia and you went for one thing and a position came about another? And the reason why I ask is UVA is not known. I know it's different now, so I don't want to cast any aspersions and be mean to people. But at that time, and many people can say, it was not necessarily the nicest towards many cultures other than if you played a sport.
Right. I would say that UVA is still a pretty homogenous place. Mm-hmm. They've been pretty slow to get with the times, and there are still no American Indian faculty members teaching at the university.
So what about you?
I'm not teaching.
Okay.
I'm research faculty. So there's a perspective that's missing, and a voice that's not there.
Wow.
Would you be interested one day teaching?
I would and I wouldn't. I mean, I have taught classes as an adjunct there. When one of the professors got sick, I filled in for him, and that was really interesting to me. But honestly, the job that I have now is secure, and I don't have to fight for tenure, and I don't have to sit on committees and play politics. So I'm really in a good position. If I want to teach, I can. I don't have to do it.
In other words, why rock the boat?
Yeah. But at the same time, UVA needs to step up and say, we make a commitment to honor that voice and to include the perspective of Native people as best we can.
Well, I said that because the way you're telling your story now is very intriguing, so I feel like as a teacher that would be a good fit.
Yeah.
So, what do you feel that? I know that since the times are continuing on, a lot of mixing is going on, and the culture is kind of dwindling away. I understand that history was told on through stories and things of that nature. Does that still occur, or is that is that bad knowledge?
No, a lot of tribes have been able to hang on to some of their oral narratives. Ours doesn't have very much of that left. We were so pressured to give up that tribal identity and the language and the religious practices and to assimilate into the Christian church. In our case, there was an Episcopal mission set up for our people. And those folks really pressured our people to stop acting like savages. That's what, and behaving in tribal ways. That being said, they were not able to get rid of our sense of community and the way that people do for each other there. So there are some elements of our ways that are still left to us, mainly in our values, and I think that's really important. But we're trying to revitalize some of our traditions, like our language, and bring back what we can, teach it to our kids so that they don't lose out.
Would you have any idea how many tribes that there still are in Virginia?
Well, there are 11 that are recognized by the state, and there are some others that are groups that would like to be recognized. And there's a process that was in place, and that's a big, complicated political animal. But there are, at this point at least, 11 officially recognized tribes. And they're all very small. They range in size from maybe 100 people up to ours is about 4,500. So that's tiny when you look at the populations of other tribes like out west. The Navajo Nation, maybe their population is as big as Rhode Island, I don't even know. But it's a huge number, and they're able to retain a lot more elements of their culture just because they have a larger base.
Well, I was going to ask regarding, in the West they have reservations, and people were marched from the East Coast out there to go to the reservations. And I'm not sure of all of the history, but was there a lot of mixing that happened out there? That was the first question. The second question was, did that happen in Virginia also as far as reservations are concerned? I'm really unknowledgeable in this case, so that's why
there's no dumb questions, and I'm happy to answer them. There are two reservations in Virginia, and they're state reservations, so this is different. The state of Virginia holds that land in trust, and the reservations predate the United States. They were established in 1646, so way back when. It's the Pamunkey and Mattaponi. Other tribes were forced to move west. Those who lived east of the Mississippi, like the Cherokee, we all heard about the Trail of Tears and all that. But a lot of other tribes were also sent to Oklahoma, even tribes from the plains and western states. So Oklahoma became this kind of dumping ground for Indians, and consequently it has more tribes, I think, than any other state now. But, there are lots of reservation populations. Those are all the lands that nobody wanted to live on. It was funny, though, in Oklahoma they discovered oil on some of those Indian lands, and so some, like the Osage tribe, is doing pretty well these days. But most of them live in places that you wouldn't want to go, and the employment situation is terrible.
That's one of the things I wanted to get into, several of these social and economical issues that I have. I'll tell you a story. One thing that bothered me was my mother's side is Blackfoot Indian. My grandmother's grandfather, which I guess would be my great-grandfather, his name was Horse. And I don't remember him. He passed away, obviously, when I was before I was 1 or something like that. And then my great-grandfather passed away when I was 5. But they lived a very long time. And one of the things that one lady I was involved with didn't like the fact that I met a friend in school who was also Native American. And that was the only 2 I remember in college. And she had given me a dream catcher. And but she, obviously being Christian and things like that, and I grew up in a Christian faith, but got mad at me for it because I said I was worshiping evil spirits. And
well, doesn't everybody worship spirits? I mean, spirit is everywhere.
Or I'm allowing it, but it was upsetting to me because, that was something piece of our culture to a point was it was like I foolishly because I didn't know any better. B, I did not know how to combat that at that time. I had to get rid of it in order to continue the relationship.
My goodness. Yeah, that's sad.
And things. Now, Long apologized for that and things like that, but it was just something that, I can understand when you mention the religious pressure for that stuff. At the same time, you see in social services, those and those who worked in, I think, in a lot out in the Midwest and West that you mentioned, where a lot of the tribes are at still. It was not accepted when they would write notes or certain things explaining where it was common practice if someone's to a spirit of their uncle who was maybe a native medicine person of their tribe. But they didn't accept that as him being to somebody else maybe acting crazy or shaking and all this other stuff, and he's not. That was part of his method, his trance.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't understand that.
Right.
And it was a lot of social stuff. Do you find that society or social services are not understanding or willing to have more people such as yourself and others to talk to help better educate themselves so they can make laws and notes that adhere to our various cultures?
Well, I think that federal policy is relevant here because what happened is that as the Indian wars were winding down and Native people became less of a threat, the federal government started regulating Indian people. In the 1880s, they passed what they called the Civilization Regulations, which effectively outlawed practice of American Indian religions. So here in a country that's supposedly based on religious freedom, Native people, the original owners of the country, can't practice their religious traditions. And it was because people were afraid that if they gathered together, there would be uprisings. And that's what the whole ghost dance was about, and the whole massacre at Wounded Knee, which kind of was the last of the horrible encounters between the cavalry and Native people. But that those laws remained on the books until 1978. So that's when we passed the American Indian Religious Freedom Act, and Native people finally had the right to practice their own religions and to involve religious leaders. The religious leaders were the ones that always got killed first. Why? Because they were the ones that led the people, and people listened to them. And so now we had the Tribal Self-Determination Act. That was in the 1970s when people finally started changing society, and the Civil Rights Act and the American Indian movement stepped up and demanded different kinds of treatment for different people, who had been oppressed. And so Native people got in on that, and we started seeing more efforts to let Native people determine their own ways, which is what self-determination is all about. So now, to get back to your question, social services and other agency folks are understanding that sometimes it's a good idea to let Native people determine for themselves how to best structure their societies, because we see that when they've been pressured into trying to join the dominant society, it has blown up and the society has disintegrated, like it has with many other cultures of people who were poor and didn't have choices.
Well, we've already heard Stephen's story, and according to my family, they say we have Indians in our family now. You hear that a lot, and it's a joke sometimes in African-American families, because if you have good hair, you might have Indian in your family. But
Good hair.
yeah, good hair. I mean, if your hair is, yeah. But like the darling child here, that would be considered, she might have Indian in her family. And we hear it a lot, but I don't know, since you are Native American, have you heard that often, and how true do you think that is?
It seems to be an American story because white people have that tradition also. And in their case, it seems like there's an awful lot of Cherokee, that's the tribe that people designate. And maybe it's just that they're not sure what heritage they have. But I think that many families have a tradition of Native ancestry, and in a lot of cases, it's true. It's just unfortunate that they can't trace it or prove, a tribal connection and become a tribal member. Doesn't mean that it doesn't exist.
So what would be the steps? It would just be like anyone else that wants to trace their ancestry back to wherever they're from. That would be the step to take to try to figure it out.
Yeah, you would have to try to identify, where the people lived, and if there are last names that connect to particular tribal groups, then you could contact those groups and try to apply for membership.
One of the things I've had trouble with is in checking back with the Blackfoot Indian and things. And my tracing was I never understood. A lot of my mother's side of the family is all in Georgia originally. My grandma told me stories that she was born on officially the 10th, but she was originally born like the 4th. But at that time, the guy comes by once every week or every other week, who was born, who had whatever issues, who paid taxes, and he leaves. Sometimes they come once a month instead of twice a month, and whatever, you just got born that day he came in.
There's your birthday.
Yeah, so I remember the stories of that. But I never understood how the Blackfoot Indian came to Georgia, but from my understanding, it was all originally from the Dakotas. And what's above it? Please forgive me, I forgot. Albuquerque. What's above the Dakotas? Providence. Is it Quebec or?
Well, the Blackfeet live in Montana.
Okay.
That's where their major reservation is, and they also have a reservation in Canada.
And because I'm still trying to find how did, obviously for a variety of reasons, but everybody's travel. But I'm still trying to find out how did a large amount come from the Dakotas and Montana all the way down here to Georgia. That's good 3,000 something miles away.
Well, people got around, and we don't think about it, but Indians were always traveling folks, and they had vast trade routes, and they were used to interacting with people thousands of miles away. So that was kind of in their DNA. And there's still a lot of Indian men that just kind of stay on the road.
So that's probably why I like to travel so much.
Yeah, that's right. So I think we do ourselves a disservice when we imagine that people always stayed put, because they didn't. And there were a lot of forces in effect that caused people to have to move or to want to move for various reasons.
One of the things, when also in checking back in the history and regarding Native Americans, it was one of the cultures, or at least some of the tribes. It was always extreme, but for the Blackfoot Indian, it was more acceptance of women being leaderships in the home. And now, in some of the other tribes, and I've escaped me which one, it was not the case. It was even more dominant than it is in what you might say white culture and other cultures where women don't have say, where similar to what you would see in Middle Eastern cultures where women do not have certain powers and rights. It was the same thing in certain Native American tribes, but I remember in the Blackfoot and I want to say Comanche, I'm not sure, but the women ran the home, also held positions, and also hunt and did a lot of other things.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's true. Tribes, particularly in this area, women could be leaders. They could inherit leadership, or they could be given it because they were popular. And so that wasn't unusual at all. Women also had control of the food supply, which gave them an awful lot of say in how things went. And they could select their own marriage partners and get rid of them if they didn't bring home the deer meat. Or
and this was before women's suffrage here in America.
Oh, this was before the Europeans even showed up.
Yeah.
So women had the vote, so to speak, before they ever had a voice here as white women. And what's interesting is some of the white women who got taken captive by the natives didn't want to go back. They were living with Indian men and they had their Indian children. They would never have been welcomed back into white society. But there they had a voice. That's, like you say, it's not true in every tribe. In some tribes, women were considered more like property and were traded, kind of enslaved in some cases. But I think in many instances, women were used to moving around and accepting their new situation, and it wasn't always a bad thing, because sometimes in your own tribe, all there was your cousins, so you needed to be able to move to a new situation. You don't want to marry your cousin,
That's true. That still happens in the country.
That's right.
Exactly, very much so.
I must please forgive me because I didn't get to research before I got here, but I do remember reading or watching a documentary on TV about, I believe it was in the 70s, there was an FBI raid of a reservation out in the West. I can't remember exactly what, but they arrested a man for killing an FBI agent.
Yeah.
I can't remember his name, so please forgive me
That's
for
okay.
not researching.
That's all right.
But if you could tell the story, if you do know the story, and then do you think that that could still possibly happen now?
Okay. Well, people don't remember the story because it wasn't really mainstream media.
Was it a Pine Ridge?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and the way the story originated, okay, I referred to the Wounded Knee Massacre earlier, and that happened in the 1800s. And much later in the 1970s, there was another occupation of the town of Wounded Knee by American Indian militants who took over that town and made a stand and demanded that certain rights be upheld, that the Nixon administration enter into negotiations, particularly about treaties that had been broken. And because the United States government entered the Black Hills, which was sacred land to the Lakota people, had been promised to them forever, entered it because gold was discovered, and basically took that land away illegally and broke all of its other treaties with them as well. So these people, it was the time of the American Indian movement, and they made this stand, and they were armed, and the FBI surrounded them, and it was a big military standoff with helicopters and tanks and all that stuff. Well, later, there was an incident at Pine Ridge Reservation, which is the area where this took place in South Dakota, where an FBI agent was killed by some Indian people. And nobody really knows even today how that went down. But Leonard Peltier is the man who was arrested and is still in prison for the murder of this FBI agent. He couldn't have done it by himself, and there were a lot of questions about the way the FBI presented its information against him during the trial. There was a lot of stuff that was really a cause for a mistrial. But he's still in prison. And every president has been asked for a pardon for Leonard Peltier, and it hasn't happened.
I remember reading, and when you mentioned Leonard Peltier, I remember the Pine Ridge. I couldn't remember the details that you gave. That's one of the things I don't understand, the lack of respect. Did you see what happened about the raid of the cattles? And where the FBI wanted to, or the government wanted to go take this man's cattle because they were grazing.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay.
That's Burnley, right?
Yeah. Now, what get me is, in the whole thing about guns and rights of the country and all this other stuff, what get me is they allow that. Obviously now, granted, you got about maybe 10, 15 agents, and you got surrounding tons of people with guns. I'm like, okay, this is one of the times that I fought the law and I won. But, they had to back off because it was a powder keg of a situation. But my thing is, if that happened now with some other groups, something else would have happened. So I don't understand the allowance for one, but not for the. Well, I understand it, but that bothers me, the allowance for one versus the others. Mm-hmm. Because I remember there was a stand one time. Now I don't remember the businesses, but when it was trying to come into the reservations to open up a business, there was a big stance against that. Uh-huh. And the FBI wanted, and I think there was some type of raid or something that happened to prevent that.
Well, there's still a double standard in effect in the way that the FBI treats different groups of people. I think it's that simple, and I think it could happen again if the situation were, volatile enough and people, armed themselves. I think we'd see another episode.
What would you say? Well, let me backtrack in terms of a little bit on TV side of things. A lot of people's favorite shows was Gunsmoke and Big Valley and the Old West.
Right.
Okay. One of the things they did a lot back then was they took a lot of people who were European and in some cases also Mexican to play Native American.
Right.
Because of the quote unquote darker skin or orange is huge, whatever the stupid excuse. What did you think about? Now, it bothered me when it came to sometimes when I saw Gunsmoke, they used whoever. Now, sometimes they did actually use Native Americans, but it bothered me with it. But they actually tried to do some justice in the land treaties, working, and show that it was not always just a bunch of savages.
Uh-huh.
That's usually what's traded out for them, especially John Wayne, Reagan movies, all those popular westerns back then. What was your feelings about that?
Well, there's a real interesting history about Hollywood and Indians, and I think they said something like 95% of the people who have played Indians were not Indians. Many of them were Italian, and that's where the term spaghetti western came from. The films were made even in Italy sometimes. And there was a real emphasis on not using Native people as actors. And I don't know why that is, because those other folks never really looked Native. In fact, one of the stories is that Native people didn't ever wear headbands. Those were invented as a way to keep the wig on when you fell off the horse. You know? So we have this idea of culture that never existed.
Yeah, because I see a lot of Native Americans wearing a headband and things, but that was never...
Yeah, and you also see guys riding around with plain-style war bonnets out in the desert in Arizona and New Mexico. And, you know, so there was this thing that was created it was all myth. And Indians were always cast as obstacles to civilization and progress. They were in the way. And the cowboys' job was to get them out of the way, move them. And I think, you know, to your point, as society began to change, some of those films became more sympathetic. And we saw movies coming out like Little Big Man and Billy Jack, where the characters were more sympathetic characters, and you began to feel for the Native people's story. But at the same time, that was also a stereotype. We're supposed to feel sorry for the poor Indian. He's still a one-dimensional character. He's not a real human being. And it really hasn't happened yet, in my opinion, that Native people have been allowed the multifaceted kinds of roles that we see other people coming to.
Yeah, because most TVs that I watch, if you see a Native American on there, they're talking about the casinos. It's some kind of, well, I watch forensic shows, so it's some kind of forensic show about somebody died at a casino or they want to take over or make more money. So
or they were drunk.
Right, alcoholism, casinos, that's the new stereotype.
See, and that was one of the things I didn't understand, because in keeping up with it, and the only reason I speak on it, because when I've gone to some Native American territories, this was a problem, but it's not traditionally. But it was always drunk, a whole bunch of other different problems. And this may have been an old '80s movie. And I'm trying to think of the movie. I want to say Best of the Best. I think it was 3 or one of them. But it was basically the guy was coming to the home and visit, but it was a small shack that owned a gas station that was the only one around the next 20 miles. And everybody was drunk and stupid and things of that nature, laying on the back of beating down cars. And I'm like, it just seemed like they found some type of way to stereotype other cultures. Drunk, they did it the same towards Native Americans. Latin Americans, Hispanics. Did the same thing with African Americans. For some reason, the broken down car in the yard, laying in the back drinking, getting drunk, it seems to be a common thing with everybody else. But they're homogenous.
Yeah.
So I don't understand that. And then the aspect of, but it seems like it was less of a movement overall with the Native Americans group to dispel that movement. How did that happen?
Less of an effort to dispel?
I don't see it, other than, and part of that obviously is the umbrella that's pushing down. But I don't see it as, except for the recent issues of, I shouldn't say recent, but the issues of the baseball teams, the football teams. You don't see the big outcry for some of the, I don't like the name, but at the same time, there's other issues. That's more of a fight, or that's more in some case.
I see what you're saying.
Why was that not of a big outcry?
I think because Native people are such a small minority now that they don't constitute an effective voting bloc, so they don't count. They're invisible, And people, our story has cast us as people of the past, so we don't even really exist in contemporary society. It's not a big deal to call an Indian a redskin like it is to call an African American, another word that you would never see as a mascot situation. But I think people, it's not even on the radar. So yeah, alcoholism is real. It's horrible. It has done more damage to Native communities than probably any other, situation, because the society has disintegrated and people have no hope and there are no jobs. And just like in the ghetto with drugs, what are you going to do? You're stuck there. And unless you find a way out through sports or, some fluke that enables you to get into a good university, you're going to be in that situation. And nobody's going to see you because you don't even exist, particularly women. Women more so than men. Totally invisible.
It's true. Like I said, the TV shows that I do happen to see, there's not a lot of talk of the women. It's more so the men. So you always hear stories of the men being drunk all the time, and the women are poor and helpless, and they don't know what to do in the situation. So I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Getting back to you and what you do at your work, is there anything in particular that you want to stress as far as what you do and trying to get information out to the public?
I think, there are so many battles that we could choose, and we've talked about a number of those issues. And my particular battle is changing the way we tell history, because history, I think, is an art as much as a science. And when I was in school, I learned that there were a particular set of facts, and that was what was important about the past. And come to find out, there are a whole lot of things that have happened that nobody talks about, particularly from Native people's perspectives. So we can change that narrative, and that's what I'm really interested in. And there's a way to do that that's positive, that helps people to want to come along and join you in that effort, rather than just standing there and say, this is wrong, and get angry, which alienates people who might want to help you. You can bring them in by saying, let's all participate in telling our shared history. And guess what? 75% or more of the people who were part of that history didn't have a voice. So every person of color, all the women, they didn't get included. It was just a story about old white guys, and that's boring. And people are tired of it. And now people want to see new role models and, people who look more like them. And understand that that is also part of the story, and those people participated in building America. So it's not about Pocahontas and Sacagawea, it's about all the Native women and all of the men who participated in that story.
Well, I've always been intrigued by the powwows, I guess they're still called powwows, I've always wanted to go, but I didn't want to go and feel like I'm not welcome. So is that something that is a tribal thing where only Native Americans can come, or is it open?
No,
and they invite anybody?
You are absolutely welcome. It is open to the public. It's an educational event that's about helping people to become more acquainted with Native culture, to interact, to visit our vendors, watch our dancers, eat fry bread. Really unhealthy.
I have seen performers at they have a festival in downtown Richmond, and I have seen them perform, and it really warmed my heart to see that. But like I said, to see a group of people together, I really want to see that and see how they interact on a regular basis with a larger group of people, not just the performers. And they don't dress like that. That's just for ceremony, correct?
Well, it's just for the powwow. We call it our regalia, not our costume, and we like to distinguish.
Apologize.
No, you didn't say that. I'm making that as a distinction for the listeners, because people often say, please show up in your costume, and we say, a costume is something you wear when you're being something you're not, and this is who we are. So we do that at powwows, but a powwow is kind of an interesting thing. It's like a combination family reunion with all the extended people coming home. It's also a chance to see other people that that are on this. It's a circuit now, people on the powwow circuit. And it's also a public event, so it's a performance, and there's a spectacle about it at the same time. And we want people to come and get to know us better, and it's a fun time. It's a positive thing.
What do you feel about roads in cities and counties and things like that name? Like here, Richmond, we have Powhatan County, Chippenham Parkway. It's Powhite. People call it Powhite.
It's still Powhatan.
Yeah. Did I say it correct?
Yeah, but that word does come from Powhatan.
Yeah, and so like, how do you feel with these things? Do you view them as a prideful thing? I mean, even though Virginia, for whatever reason, kept us, but did not accept it, but did we keep it as a prideful thing?
I think it's important because it's one of the few visible markers on the land that lets us know this is and was a native home place. So when you see those words, Tappahannock, Powhatan. The James River used to be called the Powhatan River.
Mm-hmm.
Then they go and change it. And that's one of the ways that the colonial authorities took over, was by changing the names of the land, and renaming everything that already had names. So these were known and loved places that had a significance in native culture that was stripped away. So I think it's important, and there are so many words in the Richmond area, when you start looking at Tuckahoe, and words that we use in our culture today. And raccoon is a Powhatan word, and so is moccasin, and so is tomahawk, and who knew? But those are words that are embedded in our culture today. They're still with us, even though people aren't speaking their languages fluently. I think it's terribly important to remember that history.
No, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to stray a little bit. Is there still a issue going on? I think there was a reservation that's near water or something of that effect, and I don't know what the argument is with it. Could you explain that?
I think you're talking about the reservoir project?
Yes. I think
Okay,
so.
this was an effort by the city of Newport News to capture the fresh water that was coming into their area from the Mattaponi and Pamunkey rivers, which form the York together. And what they wanted to do was to pull that water in so that they would have fresh water and other localities wouldn't have access to it. So they were going to own that water. Rather than build a desalination plant in their own area and turn salt water into fresh, which they could have done, they were going to lock this water down. And what it would have done is drain those two rivers in a way that would have affected the wetlands permanently and really caused some serious environmental problems.
Because it's backflowing and just adding more chemicals that comes out that feeds into it.
Well, it's going to create swamps because you're taking so much water out of those environmental areas. And in this case, the Native people won. Yay, because that almost never happens. Usually, we're going to put in a dam, you're just kind of, you're without luck.
So is that why, like, I go to Prince George pretty much every week, so there are signs that say Chesapeake Watershed. Is that part of the reason?
Well, all of the rivers that are in our area are part of the Chesapeake Watershed, and that's just a way of letting us know that every body of water drains into that Chesapeake. And whatever we do to the rivers and the creeks, we're going to do to the Chesapeake Bay. And we have messed it up big time. But now, because we're doing some environmental protection, some of that is coming back. We're starting to see more oysters, not like there used to be. Used to be oysters the size of saucers. You don't see that anymore.
What would you say to the issue of? Well, let me ask you this: how would, other than waiting for a festival, okay? I'm a father, white, or whatever culture. You know what? I want to, besides the books and everything, I want to take my child to a reservation. Could we just, somewhere in the middle of Arizona, we on a camping trip? I drive by one and see town, the actual town. Can we just walk on in there? Hi, I'm Joe Brown, and I have my family of Tom, Dick, and Harry, and my wife's Mary Lou. Can we come visit your reservation? I mean, how would somebody properly, with respect?
Well, that's the key right there, is with respect.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody can go onto a reservation and usually be welcome, because despite that whole terrible history, Native people are still very welcoming, and that kind of throws me for a loop, that they're still hospitable people. but with respect. We'd like to learn more about your people. How would you suggest that we do that? That kind of thing, rather than just, kind of plowing through and taking pictures of people without asking permission. The things that the people who aren't paying attention do sometimes. And there are different ceremonies sometimes, like I'm thinking of Pueblo feast days, where you can go and watch dances, but you need to be aware that this is a traditional culture, and while it's open to the public, there are ways to act.
Because I think something like that, because we're such a society that's used to just randomly taking pictures, but something of that sensitive nature.
Yeah.
Like I've been to overseas, those who went to in some of the small towns where we visited the Holocaust, some people kept memorabilia of the weapons used or their houses that was damaged from that, raided, not because they hate the whole experience or in the story, but they kept it as a means of remembrance of where you came from and appreciate what you have. But we ask, but we have a picture. Because it is a glorious thing to take a picture, but not something of you just automatically take.
Exactly. It's not there for your entertainment. Yeah. So, yeah.
How do you feel regarding the removal or the exoneration of Native American history from education, especially middle and high school? Whereas same thing as with African Americans, you see or black people, they see in Texas, they want to remove black history, or other than whatever, they just gloss over it like it never happened. They like to gloss over like the Holocaust. They want to gloss over so many other different things, especially in Native American history. Of all, you barely see it, other than George Washington sent his troops and killed a bunch of Native Americans because he was occupied. How does that feel to you?
Well, it feels awful, as you might imagine, and that is what I'm all about with this work, is saying, in Virginia, Indian history didn't just happen from 1607 until 1700, and then the Indians vanished into the mist. There were people here 18,000 years ago. So that's a very long time that we've, kind of just chosen to ignore. And then there are people here today. And so there's been that continuous thread of existence, and I want to tell that story, not the story of John Smith and Pocahontas.
Now, again, asking a silly question. In the beginning, it was supposed to be one giant landmass, and it broke apart, and supposedly the bridge from Asia to America and the Indians came over on the bridge before it fell apart. Do you believe that?
Well, that's what's really fascinating about archaeology, is there is no evidence for that because it's all underwater, and we don't have a material record of it happening. So it may be that 10 to 12,000 years ago, people came across the Bering Strait with their spears hunting the mastodon, which is, I just say this like, a song, because that's what I learned, and then that's what was presented to us. But now archaeologists are saying maybe there was more than one migration. Maybe people came in boats at different time periods. Because you look at people in Alaska, and they look like people from Mongolia. But go to South America,
totally
they
different.
don't look anything like that.
Mm-mm.
They're small, they have round faces, they have round bodies, and it's very different. And so genetically, it seems like these aren't the same people. Native people say they've always been here.
See, and I've met a lot of Native Americans in South America, and people think, and that kind of blew my mind as a kid or young adult, I should say, going down there for sports. And Uruguay and Peru. But it's a lot of explorations of things like that, and just kind of got stuck, for a lack of a better term. And you see so many from Mongolia. I've studied a lot with Genghis Khan and the troops and things like that, and how actually everybody tried to lean everything towards they were quote unquote the great rulers, but it wasn't. You can never be a great ruler without any help. And actually, in a lot of cases, they weren't the one. A lot of the weapons or technology or things was either invented by blacks or Native Americans. Right. And some of the exploration, he could not find a strategy and things like that with all of them. But the books say something else. He went and found all this stuff. That was not the case.
Right. And so there's no credit given to the sophistication of African Native cultures. They're cast as primitive, like the people are at some earlier stage of human evolution. And I've even heard people say, like, it was when the English arrived that man first encountered this continent. And it's like, who was here before if it wasn't man? Were they apes? You know, it's creepy. And even...
we came from apes, right? That's
yeah. Well, guess what? All the people came from Africa. I love that story. But even to the point where American Indian history was presented in museums of natural history, where we talk about dinosaurs and insects and rocks, not about human beings. So that's just weird.
What do you feel about... I have a ton of questions and things in my head, and that I have my notes and stuff, so you have to forgive me if it sounds crazy.
Okay.
What do you think about the cartoons? One of my earliest remembers of cartoons were some of the early ones. It was when some of the Western cartoons, it was always Tonto or Rolling Rock, the guy that was just, exploration, and he talked with the slow speech, whatever. And it was the same guy that did the same voice for the Latin American guys, the same guys that did for any other race, for whatever he thought it was. But he was always like, "Go west, young man," and he'd tell them how to find the water or things like that. One of my favorite cartoons, actually, and I'm not even sure if it should be my favorite anymore, because when I think about some of the stereotype, do you remember Brave Star, or have heard of it? Okay. Brave Star was based in a little bit in a futuristic world, but it was Native American John Braves. And I may be saying the name wrong, but John Brave Star, but he was a Native American fighter for justice and things like that. But there wasn't many positive or good or bad images, I should say, of Native Americans. Do you feel? Did you see anything out there that was like you, or that you intended to? Feeling some type of connection or with cartoons?
No. No, I remember the movie Peter Pan, where there was a cartoon about Tiger Lily, Princess Tiger Lily, and people dancing around a fire going, guess what? Native people never did that. I don't know who made that up.
Was that Disney because he did see them dancing around a fireplace with the cartoons and things like that? Was that Walt Disney or somebody that did that mess?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, now they're going to remake it. Who knows what they're going to do?
I would be surprised if that place don't get burned down for that mess.
And here's the thing, is that almost every American child, if I ask a college class today, how many of you have seen Disney's Pocahontas, almost all of them will raise their hand. That is the only exposure they've had to a Virginia Indian. That's their education. So this chick who looks like a native Barbie dancing around singing with raccoons and stuff, and John Smith looks like a blonde Ken doll, but in reality he was this short, squatty redhead, and nobody liked him, And they never had a relationship. So she married John Rolfe, not John Smith.
What was the? And I'm trying to remember the name of the lady in the character. She dressed. It was a Disney movie, but they thought she was a man until she got hurt. Mulan.
Oh,
What was your thoughts of Mulan?
Well, I didn't see that one. I got so sick, honestly, of these ways that people are characterized. I knew there were lots of Asian people who didn't like Mulan as much as I didn't like Pocahontas. I just gave up.
Because I felt like Mulan is Fa Mulan, and I just felt like they just added extra paint just to do something. I understood why, but I felt it was so hastily made without any input from you or Native Americans or anybody just reading a cultural book. You may have no one's going to get it perfectly right, but at least something. But it just seems like they just threw something together. And the interesting thing is widely critical as a success that Disney integrated into minority world.
Right, and the series of princess movies that they have, and isn't it great that we have role models for other kids so they don't all look white?
Yeah, but they went straight back. What was it, Frozen and some of the other ones, they just go straight right back to it. Okay, thanks for the one or two characters.
Yeah, and right to the stereotypes.
Have you heard any, well, I know at one time they started excavating the land around William and Mary or in Williamsburg because they found, I guess, the outlines of Indian camp. Do you know anything about that?
You might be talking about Werowocomoco, which is the site of Powhatan's headquarters, and it was a big deal that they excavated it and found that not only was it much more sophisticated than we thought and much larger, but it had been occupied several hundred years before Powhatan took up residence there. So it was already a place of leadership and spiritual power, and he knew that, and that's why he went back there. And so they have found just thousands and thousands of artifacts from both periods of occupation there. And it's actually down on the York River below Williamsburg.
Okay, is this okay? I'm trying to remember. There's a story. I know we went to Nag's Head or Kill Devil Hills or something like that. And we went to a show about the lost colony, and I'm not sure exactly where it is. Are these the same the Native American tribe that was in that area also?
They are culturally and linguistically related. So same basic language, same basic culture. Those people lived on what is now the North Carolina coast, and it was called Roanoke, the island where the people landed. And the English landed, and then after a few years, a big drought came. Their leader went home for supplies and left them there for 3 years because he couldn't get a ship to come back. So when he came back, the colony was deserted, and all they saw was the word Croatoan carved into a tree. So it's this big mystery, and the lost colony. Well, we know what happened. They got adopted by the native people. What else would it be?
Well, there's like 3 different endings where
know?
like a child got kidnapped and everyone else was killed, and it was.
Well, maybe if they didn't act right.
But was that the first English colony?
It was. That was the first attempt that we know of. Yeah. And then that was Sir Walter Raleigh and all of that. And then, 1607 was Jamestown, and that was the one that succeeded.
What are some of the things in the government right now? Native Americans have one of the few, if I think of the only one that still has a recognizable dual citizenship, you might say, or rights. So if somebody within a Native American reservation recognized a Native reservation did something wrong, not necessarily prosecuted by the government, your reservation handled it.
Well, many of the larger reservations have tribal court systems which are set up to deal with mostly misdemeanor crimes. Felonies, I think, are still handled by U.S. judicial system.
Do you want that changed?
Well, it would be fair to say that Indian people could apply their own jurisdiction since they have lawyers and judges like everybody else. One of the interesting things recently in the news was a provision within the Violence Against Women Act that needed to be renewed. And in this case, non-Native men who sexually abused Native women could not be prosecuted on reservations.
What?
Yeah. So sexual predators could live right at the edge of the reservation and abuse Native women basically at will because there was no way that they would be prosecuted. And the mainstream courts didn't handle it. And so these women, when I say invisible, I really mean it. And they were just prey of these guys. And so in this new provision of the Violence Against Women Act, tribal courts finally have jurisdiction to deal with this problem.
That is a major loophole. That how in the world that could last this long, even exist?
So those are some of the things that tribal communities deal with, is, to what extent are we really have our own autonomy? How can we say we're in the era of self-determination when we don't have the right to prosecute people who abuse our women, or other situations, gaming tribes. Okay, so the state has a law that says you can have a casino if you're a tribe, but you have to enter into a negotiated compact with that state. So you're not really sovereign. And we say Native tribes are sovereign, but it's a limited sovereignty. And at any point, Congress has the right to intervene on behalf of the United States and say, sorry, the interests of the United States supersede your interests as a tribal community. And just basically eminent domain, they wipe it out. So,
what other laws are out there that we're missing that needs to be recognized within the Native American community?
Well, I would say one thing is we need to have some teeth in the American Indian Freedom Religious Freedom Act, so that, for instance, when Native people want to go to their sacred places and worship, they have access to do that. Sometimes they can't. Sometimes it's a place like Devil's Tower where people are mountain climbing the sacred place. And how are you going to practice your religion if people are out there entertaining themselves and they're saying, well, that's our church, it's religious to us, and asserting that. So that's one issue. Another issue is the Indian Child Welfare Act, where Native kids were being taken out of tribal communities and adopted mostly by white people, and then their tribal culture is lost. They have no connection. And so ICWA was passed in order to make sure that those kids got to stay in tribal communities and be adopted by their own people. There have been recent challenges to that, where one kid was taken out of her community. Her father no longer had access to her because these other people had already adopted her while he was off serving in the military. So there's just, there are issues that continue to confound the principles of justice when it comes to Native people.
Or common sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you feel? I'm sorry, Ms. Bless. What are your feelings towards that? It was already hard to get acceptance within black people within the military and also in government positions. You see, I think there are currently 2 active Native Americans within Congress. It's a 2 or 3, I forgot.
Yeah, it's pretty small.
What do you feel? Which sadly still represents what we have here. What do you feel we need to do to get more recognizable votes? Is it by an issue of more acceptance, or just getting more people of Native American within office? Because you don't have that many wishing or trying to desire, or even those who are
Or do
pushing.
they even trust the government really at this point?
Right, because even if they're Native American, they still could be, a man is a man regardless of the culture. He could still be corrupted, women as well. So I'm just saying that, do we need to get more Native Americans into office, or what have you?
Well, I think one issue that still plagues us is we haven't caught up with educationally with the rest of the country. There are so few Native people with PhDs that it's really sad.
Is it true? Is it true from my? I pulled up some notes I had for a couple of years ago. 54% drop out of high school.
Yeah, the dropout rate of high school is really dismal.
It's like over almost 60%.
Native communities and especially among young men. So guess what? The prison population is high. You have a lot of people dropping out of high school. They're unemployable if there are jobs in their area anyway. So we have this whole problem of social disintegration that has not yet been addressed.
So it's basically not encouraging you. Okay, why go to school if we can't get a job?
Right.
Even if I got all the education
and
tools.
The lack of self-esteem and suicide is a terrible problem among young Native people because they just don't see any hope.
Is it something that we Native Americans just need to build more businesses for themselves, such as what we tell black communities and other communities and things like that? Do you feel that's an issue?
I don't know the answer. I think it's the same as it is with the black community. Everybody has a solution, but nothing has fixed the problem.
Do you feel like when you go to reservations and places, and to my knowledge, and I'm not saying they're the answer, but you don't see Walmarts, you don't see drugstores, you don't see a variety of these things in these communities. What will it take to get them in there, and much less the Native American communities and reservations to accept that? And it's not as a means of, okay, just because you bring several of these big businesses, I'm not trying to take away your culture. But I'm also trying to provide you a job and a means, because let's face it, a lot of them, the nearest hospital is 20, 30 miles away. Mm-hmm. The nearest, it's a trip just to go get groceries.
Yeah.
Or if you're not living off your own land. Mm-hmm. What can we do to get back to it? Because, it's still a trade and barter system.
Well, that goes back to the economy. If a lot of your community is on welfare and they don't have an economic base, you're not going to build a Walmart. But Native people love Walmart. And we make jokes about, like family reunion is in the layaway line at Walmart. It's right before Christmas because that's when you see everybody, oh, I thought you were dead, cousin. No, I haven't seen you all year. But I think, how are you going to attract that kind of business growth? It's not through building small business. I don't know, but there are efforts underway, and I shouldn't paint it like it's all dismal doom and gloom because it's not. There are a lot of people out there who are doing really good work to try to address some of these problems.
Well, in that situation where a Walmart would be built in that area, in my understanding, Native Americans are really, the land is sacred. You don't want to take away from the land. You live off the land. You love the land. So would building a Walmart be a thing that they would want on their land?
Or better yet, let me add to it, have something more, like, for example, you see, because the Hispanic population has grown, so there was always a big push to have more diverse foods, or the black communities, and more diverse foods, ethnic cultures, and foods. So if I build a store, I'm going to have more items akin towards your needs, or things of that nature, or traditional colors. Mm-hmm. Would that something to what Ms. Bless mentioned?
Yeah, well, to a point, I guess. I mean, I think that Native people, they pretty much eat what everybody else does anymore, except for fry bread. But
y'all eat chicken, right?
You said frog?
Fry bread.
Oh,
no, not frogs. Fry bread.
I couldn't hear what you said. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's my fry bread is like the quintessential Native food anymore. It's a joke almost. But people do eat a lot of it because guess what? It's made out of flour and water, and it works for poor people. But I think to get back to your question, Native people, you have to move along with the times. We can't go back to hunting deer and fishing, and so you have to have stores, and you have to build them with sensitivity. And you don't build them right next to Devil's Tower or some sacred place. You put them, where it makes sense. There are ways to construct a modern existence within tribal value systems.
What about the military? Do you feel the military has done a fair job in integrating and acceptance of Native Americans?
More so now than before. Native people are extremely patriotic and take great pride in the fact that they have served in every military engagement since the end of the Indian War.
See, and that was the thing I didn't understand of more so than white America. They are very... You see even more of them Republicans based on top of all that. Will stand by the American flag and the eagle, knowing the history that done more so than all.
Yeah, well, and I wonder too, is it real patriotism toward the United States, or is it the love of the homeland that existed before that? And Native, there's a warrior tradition, and Native men honor that, and they're respected for that within their whole community. So when we have a powwow, we're the only ones who do veterans dances when it's not Veterans Day. At every powwow we honor our veterans. So.
But see, and here's the thing I don't get. When you see, and if you want to go off a stereotype, when it comes to somebody working hard, you hear a lot of stereotypes. We're going to get somebody Latin American, Hispanic, or Native American, because they're going to show up on time, they show up early, stay late, do what they do, never miss a day, and just go from there. The way I was told, my family would never miss a day, and very few ever missed a day. If it was like my great-grandfather never missed a day. Mm-hmm. The only time he missed it was I think he just was too sick or something like that. But even if a child's being birthed, you don't miss work.
Right.
So with that type of, if you want to go off a stereotype, why is not many more Native Americans in corporate America, or just in the major job market?
I don't know the answer. I don't. I think some families have more of a work ethic that they impart to their kids, and other families, if your family has always been on public assistance and there haven't been any jobs in your community, then how are you going to teach your kids a work ethic? They don't have any conception of what that is. So,
What about? I'm sorry, Ms. Black. Go ahead. The teen pregnancy rate in Native American society is, correct me if I'm wrong, 9 out of 10 or 8 out of 10. It's just extremely extraordinary high.
I don't know. It's an explosion. Well, I think that goes along with everything else, you know. I mean, this is what girls do, because what else is there, you know? And what you hear with teenagers, somebody to love me no matter what, you know, and this kind of romantic thing that happens, and just, you know, lack of, not necessarily education about birth control, but just don't care, you know, and the boys are not responsible. So, you know, sometimes that happens. And I think in many Native communities, though, there is more of an understanding that the whole family raises that kid. And lots of times it's the grandma, because sometimes the mother is, you know, a situation with substance abuse or what, you know, whatever, can't do it. But there's an understanding that the family is responsible, for good or bad.
To answer questions, user asked if there are any Native Americans serving now in politics.
Oh, you did ask that question.
Yeah. I am not familiar with it, but just going off of federal, there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, only 10. Only 10. And majority were from Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. And please forgive me, Choctaw.
Choctaw? Choctaw.
Choctaw, okay. Choctaw, is it all been Choctaw or Cherokee? One from Seneca and the other one's from Cheyenne. Mm-hmm. That's all it's been from.
And they're all in Congress, right? Because the senators have retired.
Well, these were all representatives and senators, but these were all mostly in the actually various times, either early 1900s or of recent. Ben Nighthorse Campbell.
Right. He and Daniel Inouye from Hawaii were the two Native people who most recently retired.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so other than that, I don't see any now.
Yeah. Well, that's a problem. And, you know, I think, you know, again, that goes back to lack of people who are qualified, interested, who have the kind of energy that's required of a politician, and who are willing to negotiate to the extent that a politician has to in order to stay successful.
Mm. Why can't we just build a college on a bunch of people come in, just build a college?
Well, we have.
I know, but more like this Seneca. There's a whole bunch of them, but it's just not enough. You don't hear the names.
Right.
If someone asks you, I can only think of two, to be honest, off the top of my head, but for Seneca and I forgot the other one, but I don't know too many off the top of my head.
There are, to my understanding, I think there's 32 tribal colleges. They're almost all located near reservations in rural areas, and most of them offer community college education. A few of them are 4-year degree institutions, like Haskell in Kansas. And some of them have a long history of serving Indian people, because the federal government used to remove kids from their families, send them to federal Indian boarding school, and those schools evolved out of that system.
What about the housing and the rising health problems? There's a lot of health problems with Native Americans in terms of, and which kind of shocked me when I was researching this over the years, given the fact that a lot of the foods was from the land, very cultured, but it was either too much. There was always a problem with too much iron or heart problems. And I didn't understand, considering the amount of health that most of them try to attend to, especially if there's people who eat healthy, just heart, natural disease or whatever. Mm-hmm. But to the amount that there's not a problem. There's a problem. What was going on? Like, I'm not understanding how that's happening.
Well, everything has shifted. Native people don't eat healthy anymore, and they don't exercise. Poor people don't get good food. So they give their kids Kool-Aid, and they eat lots of flour and sugar, and just like everywhere else. the diabetes rate is huge, terribly high, and even in younger kids, it's coming earlier and earlier in some of these poor communities. But I should also stress that many communities are addressing that situation, and I really don't want to paint a picture that there's no hope. In Virginia communities, for example, we don't have those kinds of problems to that degree because people do have access to jobs and aren't out in the middle of nowhere on a reservation.
You got to walk to everything in Virginia, so you're not going to get to anything.
Well, it's also, I mean, it's not like we're all so healthy. They came to make a movie, The New World, about Virginia Indians, and they couldn't find enough American Indian men who looked athletic, so they had to bring them in from other places. Because people, we live like other people, and we don't
So that's
work.
a stereotype that these guys.
You're not running
six-pack
around and
and
hunting deer all day. long.
So you're not going to find a Native American, built this, that, okay.
No, I keep looking for one. No. I'm just kidding.
If there's any out there, she's available.
No, I don't know that would be a good idea.
Is there a problem as far as dating is concerned if you want to keep the Native American line going? Because I ask because we deal with dating with one lady that comes on Monday, and she talks about dating, and we talk about interracial relationships and things like that. So is there a problem as far as being a Native American woman or a Native American man to find a Native American mate?
Yeah, the pool is really small. So, I mean, yeah.
Would you have a problem with someone's, let's say, acceptance? Okay, for example, let's say you meet somebody like me. I'm half. But more often than not, I'm considered more obviously a black man. Would you have a problem with somebody like that, or would you have a problem? Well, excuse me. Let me be correct. Are you married or single?
I'm single now.
I'm single now. Okay.
I have been married at
Okay.
other points in my life.
Okay. Now the problem. So we'll kill him later. But would you consider marrying or dating another race or gender and things like that? And whose acceptance of
Well,
your...
yeah, and people have, and I would say there's, this whole notion of full-bloodedness has got to go because American Indians are the only ones we hold to that standard, where everybody is mixed just about in some way. And it's certainly the case with Native people. So
I know it's a problem when you're trying to find transplants and things of that nature, so I know that's a big issue. Well, I've seen many pass away because of the fact that everybody's so integrated. You're looking for a quote-unquote full blood of whatever in the medical society. You're not going to get that too often.
Well, and it creates a real problem in terms of identity because, what was stressed to us by some of the elder women is you should marry Indian men and have Indian babies because the blood is getting diluted, and we don't want that. But at the same time, you don't want to become the racist people who targeted you.
You
by
become
saying,
exclusionary.
I'm not going to mix with other groups. Then you're as bad as they were.
They said about almost 90 recent as of 2010 and 11, 90,000 foundless homes or 90,000 homes or that were families that were homeless were Indian families. And that's starting to be a growing trend. And that also 30% of American Indians live on overcrowded homes, and sometimes 25% live into 3-bedroom homes with the lack of hygiene and also proper running water.
Well, that happens in rural, poor communities.
With the technology to build running water, now granted, I understand in certain areas lack of rain. I get that part. But you name rivers and things like that. Heck, truth be told, we took the technology of a dam and running water from Native Americans. So I don't understand why we can't build running water in reservations.
Well, somebody's got to make that investment.
Because I'd rather spend, say, it costs too much. Well, I look at it this way. Paying the health care from taxes, because obviously you're, quote unquote, you're still a citizen.
Right.
So spending $500,000 to build a dam versus $10 billion because of health care, I think the cost is simple.
Well, you're taking the sensible long-term view, and lots of people don't. They look at the short-term cost. And the other thing I should say, too, is a lot of Native people live in cities these days. They aren't out on the reservation, and sometimes they come home, and visit, but they want to have jobs, so they've moved into, cities that are close by sometimes and sometimes not. But I think there's a lot of movement among the American Indian population coming home to visit and going back. There's always that kind of shifting going on.
What would you say is some of the things that we addressed a lot of issues? What are some of the things that you feel that we could do better in terms of myths? Is it through education, more stuff on TV and movies? What do you feel some of the things we could do better?
I would say all of the above. I mean, the more people are consciously aware of the existence of Native people and that history and their concerns for the present and future, the better able we are to address those problems.
Now, tell us a little bit about your group that you are in University of Virginia. I totally was remiss in that, so please forgive me. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, that's okay. I work for the Virginia Foundation for the Humanities, which is the statewide humanities council. And what we do is public programs that help to educate people about different aspects of history, literature, the humanities in general. And so one of the programs we have is Virginia Indian programs. That's what I direct. We also have a African American programs component, and those are the two because historically those are two people whose stories didn't get told. So we don't have like a division of Hispanic, or Asian, because that's just not historically what Virginia experienced. So it's all about the state and what we can do to expand people's awareness. Historically and in contemporary ways.
My father used to take us on trips, and we would take Route 301 or Route 1, and we would stop and we would read the historical markers. Most of those are Civil War historical markers, but are there historical markers for Native American or battles, or for, like they have one for the house that John Wilkes Booth was killed in? Do they have like, I hate to use the example of plantations because I didn't like plantations going to visit, but do they have somewhere where people can go to visit?
Well, there are lots of highway markers about Native people, and it's been interesting too because there's been kind of a program of correction in some cases, where you talk about such and such a place, the Indians massacred these people or whatever, so there's that kind of history, and we recently had a diversity program within the Department of Historic Resources where we made new markers about the history of people of color.
I need to see that because our New College, is it still called New College? Okay, over JPA area, they built over slave burial grounds. And they showed us the trail, how that was they used to travel from there all the way over to Thomas Jefferson's land to go with berries and hunt and everything else. And some, if you were lucky enough, what's the street that you go past, Rugby Road, past the hospital before you get to downtown, where the train station is in Charlottesville?
I'm not sure which one.
What's the street that the train station is off of?
The Main Street.
Main Street, okay. And before you get to Main Street, before you get to downtown and go down the hill, you split to the right or left. They used to walk, if you were lucky enough to get into those houses back over there where the constituents lived and things like that. That angered me.
Yeah.
But so now they've made similar markings. And for that, I'm interested to see how much of it is done in respect, because I felt like they barely just tossed something over there. I think the sign was, "Oh, slaves were just lived here." Over in New College, so I didn't understand that.
Yeah, and what was interesting about this program is that the tribes were able to submit text for markers that they wanted to see, and we had to come up with our scholarship to back it up, but we could pick events that we thought were important, and they would make a highway marker out of it.
On the stereotype of the savagery of the Native Americans, it's not correct. I mean, well, to my understanding, Native Americans that lived here, if they were warring, then that's what was done. You know, they were at war like anywhere else. You can consider anyone that's at war savage, but
Right.
no one does that. But I don't know what my question is. How could you speak to try to make people understand more so it wasn't savagery, it was the way of life, and that's what Native Americans knew at the time.
Right. Well, there was a lot of misunderstanding. The English thought that anyone who wasn't Christian was a savage, and that's the way that they differentiated themselves and made themselves look better. Yeah, but a lot of the things that the English did were really pretty barbaric. I mean, they believed in drawing and quartering people and beheading them and hanging them, and, you know, that went on until pretty recently. You know, so how could you say that those are not savage actions? And killing women and children. Native people didn't do a whole lot of that. The women and children became prisoners and were ultimately adopted into the society that won, but they were not killed, and they were certainly not tortured initially.
There's a couple of groups on Facebook that keeps up with a lot. I forgot the gentleman's name, but he keeps up with a lot of historical pictures of Native American tribes and things like that online. So it helps a whole lot. Before we leave the subject, there was always a question, because I'm heavily in the field for other reasons, but in the fashion and entertainment, fashion world, I should say, it's starting to be more of a culture interest in Native American cultures or designs. And I'm seeing a growth in Native American designers, or people who are at least for maybe they is doing it for profit because it's a trend versus actually adhering to it. But you're seeing more and more Native American designs or similar styles that akin towards that history. What are your thoughts towards that, ma'am?
That's true, and I think it's exciting that, you know, Native American art is evolving into the world of fashion as it is everywhere else, and it's not just traditional, it's also contemporary.
And I'm seeing it. My only issue is when I see them put the whole headpiece on some model versus getting an actual Native American. That kind of bothers me.
Okay, now that's another issue entirely, and that is a problem because you're enacting a stereotype, especially if you have some young blonde woman wearing a war bonnet that traditionally a chief would have had to earn every one of those feathers in a way that was culturally appropriate.
When it came to the war bonnets, some of it was introduced as just a colloquial hat, but it did not understand the true meaning behind it.
Yeah.
Well, how did the war bonnets come about? And two, how did people earn the feathers?
Okay, well, the eagle feather was thought to be and is thought to be sacred because the eagle flies highest in the heaven and the closest to the Creator. And so when we pray, we use sage or cedar and burn the smoke, and the eagle feather, we wave it to help the prayer go up to the sky. And the eagle has the most respect of any bird. And so in Plains culture in particular, the war bonnet was a way for a man to earn tokens of bravery through acts of war or things that benefited his people. He would win, the right to wear the eagle feather. And over time, some of those, the collection of feathers grew till the bonnet touched the ground. So this was a guy who had really done a lot, like a highly decorated brigadier general. Maybe you would think of a guy like that. And so to take that symbol of culture and respect and turn it into something where people go jumping around in an athletic game, or some model is wearing it, like Cher on the cover of her album Half Breed, is really an act of disrespect. And people don't think about it, again, because those stereotypes are so embedded and because Native people are invisible as contemporary, human beings. You don't think about disrespect in that way.
What do you feel towards the sports teams and things?
Here we go.
Yeah. I couldn't let you get away without answering that one.
Yeah, well, it's funny because my brother is a big Skins fan. Growing up in Northern Virginia, he has all the paraphernalia and all of that. And yet, he's a guy who's brown. So that's kind of weird. There's been this whole who is that guy? What is his name? Dan Snyder is the owner of the team.
He's a racist.
He insists
SOB.
that he's honoring Native people, but he hasn't really asked their opinion. And he gets like one or two guys who's like, oh yeah, I think it's great, but most Native people don't like the name, and there are historic reasons for not liking that name.
I remember my grandmother told a story. She did it on here, I think, if not, I'd get her to do it. When she you had to get your tickets to go out of town. You had to come up here and get your tickets a couple of weeks or so in advance to leave from Richmond. And at the time, she was in Newport News or in some other places. But one time, she came and got the tickets, and they were like, "No, get away, you Native." And I can't remember some of the terms she used, but Native American. So, you're not black, you're some Native American chick, and they made her sit outside in the grass with black people and other Native American for a day and a half. Kids, there were people who literally died, and she's sitting there holding kids in terms of before she can get back on the train. When they did get on the train, they got to sit back in a straw until they got to Delaware before they could actually sit in the coach.
Wow.
And stuff like that, and coming back, and I'm sitting, and that was one of her reasons for many years. And granted, I can't say we're not like that. But, Richmond do some funny things, but that's one of her things about Richmond, and hearing the stories and stuff like that. And then I remember people was telling her on the job they skinned the people. And literally skinned the people. Like, say, okay, they told my grandfather at the time, you got a choice, for your friend. Either you can have him hang, or we can skin him like an American.
Yeah.
And I'm just sitting here like, really? So I'm seeing that every time I see the name Redskins. That's all I think about.
Yeah. And there was that history, and the history of scalping people. That wasn't something that was indigenous. So it's something that evolved over the course of all of these wars between cultures. It's not a happy memory, and I don't see any honor in it. And I keep wondering why it is that we've had so many Native mascots and we aren't honoring other people in this way. You don't see teams called the Fighting Zulus because somebody might have a problem with that. Even though they had a proud warrior tradition too. So why is it that Indian people are selected for this so-called honor?
And you've seen people from that culture hate the names, but they don't want to be identified with that.
Right.
Because it's a symbol of negativity.
Right.
And things like that. We don't have any Native American toys. Not as many, anyway, except for the only one I remember is the American Girl doll. And I want to say that FHM up in New York, they have a lot of Native American toys. I have to give them credit where credit's due. They were one of the first ones out there that had a lot of Native American toys. And if I, from my knowledge of the store, and if I'm incorrect, please anybody correct me. But they've always gone to have different things. And when I go up there, the American Dream Girl or American Store have all these different dolls, have of all these different cultures, and not just this one stereotypical. She go hold some gun or whatever. No, they have a lot of different styles. You can even design your own. But outside of that, that's like in New York. And it's not exactly broadcasted in the world.
Right.
Unless somebody's from there and knows about it, you're not going to hear about it. So what can we do to get more toys out there?
Well, again, it's the thing about, stereotypes, and are we going to do something that's authentic? Like, there were some really cool Indian games where you would throw a stick through a hoop that was rolling, or even the shell game where you put the pea in one shell and you switch it around. Indian people were doing that way back when, and so it's not like something that was invented by another group. But the toys that I see that are Indian related are rubber tomahawks made in Taiwan with colored feathers, even sold at powwows by Native people because they can make money, or these flutes from Central America that drive you crazy because the kids are loo, 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 loo all day long at the powwow. So in a way, they're still playing into that stereotype. Every play school family group has these little Indian people with the visiting chief and the teepees, and so
And teepees was not really a whole lot of Native American, from my understanding.
Just the plains.
Yeah, just the plains,
Yeah.
but it was not a overall cultural thing. They lived in a lot of sticks and homes built
Right.
out of wood and everything else.
Right, we
But
have
you-
wigwams here.
But for whatever reason, they come up under their fake reservations, just a bunch of teepees.
Mhm.
And then that's how the cavalry decided to design their homes and all that other
Right.
stuff.
Well, the stereotype in the American mind is the guy with the war bonnet on the horse, and he lives in a teepee, and he hunts buffalo.
It smokes.
Smokes,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. He smokes. Oh, great father.
Do you
Go in peace, my son.
do you believe in the new trend of marijuana?
Do I?
That's like, why the heck he answered
There
that
was-
question?
There was a time when I would have thought that was really cool, but I think I'm kind of past it. And it's not something that's really associated with Native culture.
Right, but it's a lot
They
of
weren't
that is.
putting pot in the peace pipe. It's tobacco, or cedar or sage.
Yeah. So, do you smoke?
No,
Oh, okay.
no, I've had cancer twice.
Oh,
sorry.
you go, girl. You beat it both times. I'm proud of you.
Yeah, but you have to wonder. I've asked this question: what stupid ancestor was it that said, "Let me light this leaf on fire and breathe it"?
There
Hello,
were a lot of people doing it with them, so
you know.
I thank you so much for all of this
Oh,
information.
you're welcome.
You've-
It's fun.
you've got-
I've learned a lot tonight.
you've
Thank you.
helped a lot of people here.
I'm happy to do it.
I've been blessed. A couple of questions on some things, current issues. The flight 370. Your thoughts on that?
The flight.
Yeah, 270.
Are we
370.
This is
370.
personal time. We're not
talking about
going to-
Malaysia?
Yes.
Yes.
The
Okay.
airplane that meant.
Okay, I got totally.
I'm sorry, I said the number wrong and
No,
everything.
I just didn't know you switched gears on me.
Yeah,
and I
I'm
didn't-
sorry.
No, it's all right.
I'm sorry, they made clear.
So what about it?
Yes. Your thoughts on it? the
My
missile plane?
thoughts. I don't know that I have a thought. I thought, if this was a hijacking, why in the world would they fly around till they ran out of gas? And, in some places the ocean is so deep, who knows if they'll ever find it.
I don't think Aquaman can find it right about now.
Yeah, I mean, they're saying there's some signals coming from somewhere, but it's 2.5 miles down, and we can't go that far, right? I mean, somebody's lungs going to collapse.
What are your thoughts towards the situation in Crimea, which actually a lot of it kind of somewhat was relate towards what's happening with the American wars?
Well, there's always been that situation where somebody is trying to take over, somebody else, and it's not my place to say. I think the United States has been in the business of promoting democracy the way we promoted Christianity. We took it upon ourselves as our burden to educate the world, and everybody should have what we have. Well, maybe they don't want it, and maybe they don't want the way that we've gone about it, which is to say, here, global friends, have our democracy, and we're going to take your resources. Curiously. So I think that's what we've done, and we are suspect, and deservedly so.
What is your favorite movie out here right now?
My favorite movie right now, I like 12 Years a Slave. It was hard to watch. I felt when I walked out of that movie like I was embarrassed to be a human being, even though I knew the story, to see it in your face like that, and to realize that, people like us experienced those things just because there were so many human attitudes at that time. It's just horrific, absolutely horrific.
What are your thoughts towards the sports right now? Like, who's your favorite sports team and things?
I'm not a sports fan.
Okay.
I'm
'Cause-
not athletic, and I don't follow along. I said, to hear a sports interview is like every interview sounds like every other interview, and I do not understand why we have to have 10 hours of analysis for a 2-hour game.
Stay
I'm like,
completely.
hello.
You got to understand what each player's
And
meant.
it's like, put something on there that I can watch, because I don't know what they're talking about.
So, do you know what a touchdown is?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, we got you covered. So, you know what a 3-pointer and a 2-pointer is?
Not really.
Okay. All
I've lost interest. See, here I am at UVA. I don't even go to
Because
games.
you see, that's the thing. As a member of the faculty, you're required at least one time to encourage in school spirit.
Never been. My belief is that behavior at athletic events is tribal in nature. It is our way of asserting our tribal identity.
Good
Out
one.
there we have these traditions, and they're sacred traditions and sacred songs, and it's just like being a member of a tribe, but not really.
I can't say nothing against that. I stand corrected. I'm going to play our lovely game of words of the week.
Oh, here we go.
Okay. Now, the purpose is, like I've mentioned it before plenty of times, some hate it, some don't care. But it's just a way of just having fun and doing things. So we had the little homogenous lady that says the words.
Lady.
Let me put it. I'm sorry.
Palter.
Palter.
Mm-hmm.
Palter.
Congratulations. Very good.
What does it mean?
Okay. It is originally French. Take a guess what the definition might be.
Does it have something to do with speaking?
Actually, yes. It's us. Get close. To talk or act insincerely or deceitfully.
Oh, okay.
To lie, to use trickery.
Well, see, I don't know what that word because everything I say is true.
Well, could you use it in a sentence?
Could I use it in a sentence?
As a verb.
As a verb.
Mm-hmm. You're allowed to use transitive as well. Transitive verbs.
He was engaged in a form of palter that I found unbelievable. I don't know. I just made that up.
That's not bad. Blessed.
No, she got it.
Okay, that's very good.
Do I get a prize?
No.
Oh, man.
He gives no prizes.
No. You know what? You're the only one that actually asked me if we get a prize of all this time.
Because no one else gets these words right. That's why.
No, there's a couple of people in here that nailed it and everything. We had a church group
You
here.
and Aurelio.
No. Aurelio refuses to play. Sincere refuses to play. He does not want to be bothered.
But I didn't get the part about lying. I just got the part about speaking.
Okay, well, but it's still it involved it, so you came very close. Here's another word.
Adduce.
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 Congratulations. Now, this one's actually, these words are actually a little bit easier than I have been. And Bless could tell you. Because he's like, the week decided to do it.
But I still can't get it, so I just...
Adduce. So it's a verb used with an object. So I guess an adjective verb. So it means to bring forward an argument or as an evidence.
I was going to say it's got to be because like deduce, deductive, inductive. I guess there's adductive to bring forward in an argument.
Correct. Latin. So can you use it in a sentence?
She could. It's not coming. She could adduce the facts in a court of law.
Very good.
I don't know.
Very
That's what I was
good.
going to say. Yeah,
She's nailing it. But see, and you're a law girl, so
I'm just making this stuff up.
Okay, I'm going to give you a little bit harder now.
Uh-oh.
Chaparral.
Chaparral.
Chaparral. That's a Western thing. There was a high chaparral.
Darn good.
CHAPPARREL.
Darn close. CHAPARRAL. So one P, switch the A from the E to the A, and you have it.
Is it a plant?
Yes, dense growth of shrubs and trees.
Oh, good job.
Darn good.
You're hurting my head.
Darn, very good. You know, I'm going to bring everybody that's done good with these words, I'm going to bring them all back, and we're going to have a contest.
We're going to have like The varsity.
I won't be here.
Varsity word game.
You very good. Could you use it in a sentence?
The high growth of chaparral on the plains made it hard to see.
Very good. Very, very, very good. You've done. It's been a while. It's been a couple
Did you
months.
ever see that show, High Chaparral? I remember the name of that.
I remember the name, but I
Along the
didn't.
lines of Gunsmoke, I think.
Very good. Very good. Now we usually go over and also a couple of things of Black history, about facts and things of nature all the time, just to see us. What have you. And
Now you're going to challenge me because I don't know it as well as I know Native history.
I just always try to
Good.
Enlighten.
Yeah.
thank you. she's trying not to laugh. Okay, and what happened on this day in 1959?
This day, today, right?
Mhm.
April 15th, 1959. That's after Brown versus Board of Education. I'm drawing a blank.
Okay, blessed.
Don't ask me. I wasn't here.
Me either.
African Freedom Day is declared at All African Peoples Conference in Accra, Ghana.
See, that
No,
wasn't even
I was
American.
going to say, I thought I was having trouble with American.
Well, see, the thing is, I focus, like I tell everybody, I don't. But people tend to assume Black history only in America, but it's not. But let me give you something here. Okay, Native American facts. I'll help you out here.
Uh-oh.
January 1st, 1833.
Was it here? In
We said
Virginia?
Native American.
Yes.
But not in Virginia.
Mm-mm. Close.
1933.
Worcester pardon, excuse me. Worcester pardon.
Worcester.
Worcester pardon.
Worcester? Like sauce?
What happened there?
Samuel Worcester and the other missionaries imprisoned by Georgia for refusing to register with the state government before working on Cherokee lands, accepted a pardon from the governor of Georgia and released from jail. Even though they had prevailed in a case before the Supreme Court that previous March, they refused to pursue further litigation in fear that it would exacerbate a growing crisis over states' rights and nullification.
Okay. It was 1838 the Cherokee were removed to Oklahoma.
That is true. That is true. All right, let me give you something.
In defiance of a Supreme Court order, by the way.
Yes, ma'am. Very good. All right, let me give you something here. I have one. This one should not be too hard. And the ghost dance.
Mm-hmm.
That was also in 1899.
1899. That's late. Really?
Mm-hmm.
1889?
I'm sorry. 1899.
Okay.
What do you know about that?
Well, the ghost dance was developed by a Paiute prophet named Wovoka, I think was his name, who said that he saw in a vision the return of the buffalo, and if the people would do this dance that he was going to instruct them to do, then the white people would disappear and things would go back to the old ways. And so the people embraced this dance because they were so desperate and starving and things were terrible. They began to do it. And that was what led up to the gathering of Bigfoot's people. Bigfoot was one of the people who was practicing the ghost dance. He surrendered at Wounded Knee, and then his people were killed unarmed in that big massacre.
Awesome job. Awesome job. I'll give you one more. I'm going to give you one more that really get you. 1887. What was a major act?
Wasn't there either.
She did not come here for this.
A major act.
She's done a dang good job.
Yeah.
I'll give you a hint. The Dawes General Atonement Act. Allotment, sorry, act.
Okay, thank you, that helps me. That was an act to cut up land that was owned by Native people into individual parcels to encourage them to become farmers. And what it did was open up a lot of land to white settlement on reservations so that Native people no longer had control of their own land.
Dang, good.
Well, this is my topic.
I know, but even then, there's people who can't do this. I mean, literally.
It had a terrible effect on Native, control. Yeah.
That one my grandmother told me about. I don't think she remembers it, but I remember that one. This one might be too easy. Third Seminole War.
What?
Third Seminole War. That one's
the Third Seminole War isn't over because the Seminole never surrendered.
Oh.
And the Seminole are people who were Creek expatriates. They lost the Battle of Horseshoe Bend in Alabama and had to leave. So they went to Florida, and there was it was Native people and some runaway slaves who banded together and outran the United States Army to the cost of something like $1 million. They kept trying to remove them to Oklahoma, and these people went into the Everglades and refused to go. So there was a lot of battles that were associated with that.
Now you taught me something new. I wasn't to my understanding, and not just going off of school, but from my research, it was to my understanding that did give up Chief Billy Bowleg.
Bowlegs, yeah.
So he gave up.
I thought he died in Florida. I thought he did not give up.
But now the Seminoles did not come from Florida.
Yeah,
that's correct.
You just said that. Okay.
Yeah, they were all renegades, people who had to go there to escape being removed.
Because everybody assumes
The
Seminoles are Florida's
in the
and
game.
No, the original native inhabitants of Florida were wiped out mostly by the Spanish, who were even more horrible in their treatment of natives than the English were. And then the Spanish set up missions, and the English wiped out the Christian Indians by destroying the missions. So there were basically very few Indian natives left in Florida, and that's why the Seminole were able to go there.
Okay, I have two quick ones, and this one I wanted to ask because I want you to correct the Trail of Tears. It was last known with the 5 civilized tribes: Cherokee, Choctaw, Creek, Seminole, and Chickasaw.
Uh-huh.
But from my understanding, that's not getting correct.
Well, it wasn't just one Trail of Tears. There were a number of them. It started in the 1830s when the United States government started removing these people who were known as the 5 civilized tribes because they had adopted farming and writing, and some of them even owned slaves and had plantations, and so they were thought to be civilized.
Wow. So,
yeah.
Okay, so it basically just because we adopted quote-unquote Western culture.
The white way of life. They were the more civilized, but that didn't help them. They still got kicked out of Georgia, their homeland, and removed to Oklahoma. And many, many court battles were fought by Chief John Ross and other leaders. And eventually it was Chief Justice John Marshall that's in the Supreme Court ruling said they were not to be removed. And Andrew Jackson, whose life had been saved at the Battle of Horseshoe Bend by an Indian, said the Justice has made his ruling, now let him enforce it. And he ordered the army to remove the Indians anyway.
Wow.
So many of them died, on those Trail of Tears, like a fourth of the people in the bitter winter and all of that. But there were a number of different removals. It wasn't just one trail.
And it was only in 1969 that all the Indians were declared citizens of the United States.
I thought that was 1924. I'm not sure. They had the right to vote in 69, but in 24 they were made citizens without their permission.
Now, would you feel that? Now, let me ask you this: do you feel that, speaking as a Native American, do you want to be a citizen?
Well, I do now because this is still a great country to live in compared to many other countries in the world. Having seen what some of the people went through, I don't want to live like they do. At the same time, if it were ever to come down to it, my allegiance is to my own people. So if I had to choose between being a Native Monacan and being a citizen of the United States, I have a hard time. I don't even know whether to stand up and do the Pledge of Allegiance. I don't know if I believe that.
See, that's the thing I don't understand. 1924 was the Indian Citizenship Act, but then 1969 was also the white paper for the. I think the Citizenship Act only applied to, from my understanding, some, but the 16.9 was the acceptance and convince Indians to accept white papers. Understand that path that was allowed to be considered citizens plus, which allowed, I guess, still retained Native American rights.
Okay. So you're a citizen, you just don't have any rights.
Pretty much.
For 50 years.
Ma'am, I thank you so very much for all of this.
You're welcome.
You've been a blessing. And anytime you have any thoughts, cares, concerns, or anything you want to bring to us, let us know. We'll get it on here.
Thank you.
You always have a platform here in Enliven Radio and Legacy Internet Radio, not just my show, but I feel confident saying all our shows.
Thank you.
Ms. Bless.
Well, thank you again for coming and speaking. I mean, I've learned a lot tonight, and I'm not able to ask questions of Native American people because I'm not around a lot. So thank you for answering the questions that I've had.
I'm happy to do it, yeah. Just remember, there's no dumb questions.
No, I have a lot of people online on our MixLR. Love Michelle K. Robertson. Thank you very much for listening. She was saying you have a lot of knowledge and she loves you. Cutting Edge saying that you're brilliant, you love her. Everybody said we need to have you on this show again once a month.
Once a month.
I do 4 shows a month, but you know what?
Native Day every month.
You know what? But you know what I'm going to do is all our shows do get put on YouTube eventually. Give us a couple of weeks behind,
Cool.
but so the interview will be on there. But at the same time, I'd love to get you on a video interview one day. I'm assuming it's safe to say your office is decorated with a lot of information and things like that. So one of these days I get down to Charlottesville, I'm going to bring me and my team. We'll come down and do a video interview.
Okay.
And things like that.
The whole door of my office has comics all over it about American Indians and non-natives and the encounters, like Columbus showing up on the beach and here's an Indian going, your luggage was booked through to India.
That is excellent. That's excellent. But thank you very much for your time, and we're going to let everybody go. And thank you very much for joining Enliven Radio each and every Tuesday from 7 to 9, part of Legacy Internet Radio. We also have great shows on Mondays, Ain't No Half Stepping with Marcus J from 7 to 9. Wednesdays, The Green Room 2.0 with Jay Grizzy and Lisa P. Great people, funny all the time. Thursdays, All Throttle Radio, the urban culture and perspective and things like that. So do that again, girl. No. Do that again, girl. Yeah, I like that one. I like that one. I might have to edit this tape and get that one. Oh yeah. Now you know you have to do that every time.
And Friday is Clutch Radio.
Go ahead. Don't finish it out. You're going to start at Friday's Clutch Radio. What else?
And then Saturday is the music mix with DJ Renee Melendez. Right?
Yep. And then we also have the P show from 12 to 2, the news show. And we also had the throwback. And did they just play that? It's from 2:30 to 5, and the throwbacks from 5 to 7. And DJ Renee Melendez is 7 to 9. So we're going to have a whole lot of things and new stuff and just a lot going on. So check us out. And of course, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, you can always contact Mr. LP, myself, Mr. Stephen Sykes on enlivenradio@gmail.com. That's ENLIVEN radio@gmail.com. And also feel free to comment on our Facebook page. Again, blessings to Mr. Sincere, Miss Brandy, who were not able to join us. And I thank Miss, also the lovely Carter. You want to say bye?
She's done.
You want to say bye? Yeah, come over here. Say bye.
Bye.
Say bye, Mommy.
Mommy's listening?
Mommy might be listening, she says. So you want to say bye to Mommy? You want to say bye to Mommy? You going to stay with me? You want to chill with me? Oh, okay, forget you
Well,
then.
please be safe driving home because we can hear the rain.
And
on
then
the
Yeah,
please,
it's
road.
been a rainy
be
day.
safe and things. But we thank you very kindly, and please be safe. And we'll talk to you soon, everybody. God bless and good night.